This is the story of Helen of Troy, legend of the ancient Greeks, with the face that launched 1,000 ships. Helen was the daughter of Zeus, the king of the gods, and of Leda, the queen of Sparta. From such beginnings, how could she ever be less than extraordinary? Zeus appeared to Leda in the form of a swan, and so Helen was born, not from her mother's womb, but from an egg. As Helen grew, so did her divine beauty. No longer in charge of her own destiny, suitors flocked to her, hoping to win her hand in marriage. But the men were vicious, hungry for their prize, and her stepfather, the king of Sparta, knew it, and so he enlisted the help of the hero Odysseus. Odysseus gathered round the hopeful men and made them swear a vow. The rejected suitors must defend the chosen man against any retaliation from others. All agreed, and in time her husband was chosen, Menelaus of Mycenae. When Helen's stepfather, too old to go on, abdicated, Helen and Menelaus became king and queen of Sparta. All seemed to be at peace. But the fearsome gods, as is so often the way, had other ideas and made this a short-lived calm. For far away in Troy, 3 goddesses, Athena, Hera, and Aphrodite, were bickering and fighting, each insisting that they were the most beautiful of the 3. To settle the argument once and for all, they asked the Trojan prince Paris to choose. But Aphrodite was sly, and she promised Paris the most beautiful mortal woman if he made her the winner. Of course he took the offer, and with Aphrodite's help, set off in search of his prize, Helen of Sparta. When Paris first laid eyes on the queen, he tried to charm her with his words, promising anything and everything and singing to her beauty. Menelaus, however, would never give up his bride. Instead, Paris took Helen away. What choice did she have? With Aphrodite in one ear and Paris in the other, she could not betray the gods and men, but she mourned the loss of her home and her husband as Paris sailed them from Sparta. When he learned what had been done, Menelaus flew into a rage. He called upon the rejected suitors to fulfill their vow and fight to return Helen to Sparta. So began the terrible Trojan War. How Helen wept, far away in Troy, as man after man of her people was slaughtered. She blamed herself. She cried aloud to the gods, wishing that they had taken her and spared the world this destruction. After 10 long, bitter years of conflict, Paris met his end in battle. Helen was alone. In her misery, she was filled with fury and bitter regret about the fate of her kinsman, her role in the destruction, and the cruelty of the gods. But at long, long last, the war was at an end. Menelaus came to her. In a passion, he raised his sword, but he could not harm her. Perhaps he forgave her. Perhaps he was weary of so much suffering already. Whatever the real cause, at last, Helen returned to her home, to the Spartan throne. What happened had happened. It could not be undone. And from the embers of the chaos lived out her life, a symbol of tragedy and temptation. Helen of Troy became legend.